I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, 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 I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. It's Jeremy Thiel here from DriverCheck. We are talking about living your best life. This is episode 2. We're talking about the thinking mind, working mind, aware mind. And to go through all those different sorts of minds, thankfully, we have Jonathan Creaghan here to walk us through that. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, Jeremy, good to see you again.
Nice to see you as always.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting conversation, I hope.
I know it will be. They always are. So for those of you who don't know who Jonathan is, he's a leadership coach. He gets companies and leaders to think differently. He's an author of a few different books that I'm glad that I've had a chance to read. And Jonathan's been working with DriverCheck, the company I work with, for about 3 years now. And he's done some leadership training courses with our leadership team. And then he's also done some one-on-one sessions as a mentor and leader. Luckily, again, myself has been involved in that. And what I do at DriverCheck is I promote education, marketing, communications. And what we're always trying to do is be at the forefront of challenges, topics that we see in our industries and daily lives. So Jonathan is a wealth of information. And when I talk about thinking differently, this is what he does. So let's just dive right into it today, Jonathan. Again, the title for today is Thinking Mind, Working Mind, Aware Mind. This is the topic that I was most excited about when I've been brainstorming with Jonathan for the last few months. So diving right into it all, Jonathan, what is thinking mind, working mind, aware mind?
That's crazy stuff, right? Because we think of ourselves as having one mind, and that is absolutely true, right? So, but we can sort of get a better understanding of the quality of the mind if we think of it like three different layers, as 3 layers. And so the thinking mind might be that outer layer of a sphere, right? Where most of your thinking takes place, but it's also where all the chatter exists, all the self-doubt and the worry and the questioning and it's typically the mind that will keep you up at night at 2 or 3 in the morning when you worry about the meeting you have the next day, or you worry about your children, or all of those sort of monsters come out. That's all thinking mind. And thinking mind worries about the future, and it questions the past, and it's all the shoulda, wouldas, and couldas. It's also has very, very little connection to actually what's going on in the present moment itself, right? So it sort of creates a barrier between you and the absolute present moment. If we think of it in terms of sphere again, the middle layer of that sphere is the working mind, and it's pure action. It's the mind that you have that you're totally engrossed in what it is that you're doing, and you lose track of time, and you use, so whether that action is being out on a sports field playing a game, or whether that action is thinking through strategically a problem, or using logic, using strategic thinking, using your rational mind, it would be your rational mind, and it translates. So it translates the thought into action. That's really the simplest way to look at it. It's in the present. It's the mind that puts my hands together. The thinking mind goes, oh no, maybe I put my hands together wrong, or what's it going to look like on the screen? That's all chattery thinking mind stuff, right? The inner core then is what we might call the aware mind, and it's the one that's just aware. But so it's always accumulating data and information, and we might call it intuition or your gut feeling, or that aha moment when you have a sudden insight into a problem that your thinking mind is worrying about, your working mind is trying to solve out, and the aware mind comes up with the answer. And so that's those aha moments, and it's that sense of knowing the right thing, even if you can't argue how you know it. And we've all had those feelings where you're doing something completely different. Maybe you're out walking, or you're in the shower, or you're driving your car, or you're baking something, and all of a sudden the answer to the problem you've been sort of twisting your head around comes up, and bam, there it is, right? And so that those are the thoughts that have the most meaning to us, because they actually have the most energy and power to us.
So the reason why I love these topics, those three different minds, Jonathan, is because I think everyone can relate. So bringing it back to the thinking mind: guilt, self-doubt, questioning, lack of trust, the mental chatter that you're talking about. So if I have to get a project out to Jonathan at 5 a.m. or 6 p.m. the next day, and I'm laying up at night thinking, why, what's Jonathan going to think of what I've said? Is it going to be done correctly? All that sort of stuff, nitpicking on yourself. We're our hardest critics on ourselves.
Yeah.
That's what the thinking mind is.
Yeah.
And when you move into the working mind, to me, it's more around tactics, solving the actual problem, or just doing, So if I want to play soccer, I'm not thinking about playing soccer. I'm just in the flow of the game. I'm just playing,
Right on.
passing a ball, shooting a ball,
Right
which comes second nature. And then when we get into the aware mind, which is a great place to be living, it's when, you have that gut instinct, or that feeling that you know the answer, but you might not be able to have the full answer, be able to type out an answer that you could share with an executive or a colleague, but having the faith that you will get to it in the right time. And so a lot of the aware mind, when we talk about in practice, I've learned about the aware mind 3 years ago, Jonathan, but I didn't actually take action on living my aware mind till about 6 or 7 months ago, when I was struggling with heavy doses of anxiety, stress, the passing of my father, and found myself after one of our one-on-one sessions, how much time I was beating myself up in my thinking mind. And we had one of the one-on-one conversations, and we talked about the thinking mind, working mind, aware mind. And from that day, and again, it goes back to a commitment I made to myself, is I'm going to live my best life. This is about, again, 7 months ago. And once I was able to make that commitment to change, I became aware of when I was going into my thinking mind.
Right.
And part of the conversation was, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't have enough energy. There's too much work. And you had asked me, well, where do you spend, what are you doing every day? Where are you spending your time? And I automatically thought about, sleeping, eating, working, but we dug deeper. And how much of my time was I spend worrying about a project, or worrying that someone didn't, like my post on Facebook, or thinking about my wife, what the argument's going to ensue after I didn't take out the garbage. That gave me the power to stop wasting my energy on nonsense, really.
Yeah.
So it's very simple to understand what awareness is, but to actually make a commitment to make that change is where I think people will see tremendous outcomes in their own daily lives.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about that, because everybody has connection to awareness. You cannot live without being conscious, right? And so everybody operates out of the aware mind more often than not. But if you talk to people, it's almost like the thought comes up through awareness into the working mind, and then the thinking mind stops it and goes, oh, well, maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe I shouldn't listen to my gut, right? Maybe that's too easy. oh no, that's too easy. It's got to be harder than that, right? So the thinking mind suppresses or discounts that sudden beautiful answer that you know you're right in having, but you don't trust it. And I had the good fortune of spending about 6 months talking to people with a colleague about intuition and its role in people's success or not success, right? And it was pretty clear that for successful people, intuition plays a pretty big role. That they learn how to trust it. They learn how to listen to it and translate the idea that's created through the awareness, through working mind, bypassing all the thinking chatter and doubt. And I think to live your best life, I think you need to, as you say, start trusting that intuition, because it's connected to information that, because of that barrier, that the thinking mind cannot connect to, because the thinking mind separates you from the activity.
And so I've lived this myself, because now I can say I am living my best life, and I, thankfully have been, because I made that commitment. And really, it sounds so simple when we talk about it, but to actually put it into practice and believe and live through it is another step in itself. And so, so we're talking about living your best life. We have, a 30-minute segment for people to learn something today, hopefully, right?
Like, 6 hours, we do whole workshops on this, right?
Yeah. So what can you suggest to our audience? Like, how can someone make a change today?
I think part of living your life, I think part of living your best life is just breathing and slowing down and just looking around you at what's going on. And if you're walking from your house to your car, it's a very simple thing. But if your car is outside and you're walking to your car, just look around at the blue sky. Look around and listen for the birds that are chirping as you're jumping in your car. Like that's where life is. And just, even if your life is really hectic, it doesn't mean that there aren't moments where you can connect. And just start there. Because what happens after a while, I mean, if you think back to our conversation about how do you engage the aware mind, it's when the thinking mind shuts down that creativity occurs. So you create ideas, or you allow ideas to emerge when your thinking mind is preoccupied. Maybe it's at 5 o'clock in the morning, or maybe it's when you're like clients will say, I have my best thoughts when I'm driving my car. Or I have these best thoughts when I'm in the shower at 7 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden, bam, there's the answer, right? So they hold the problem when they go to sleep. They don't try to solve the problem, and they let the aware mind sort of bubble up through the night, and bam, there's the answer, right? So aware mind is connected to life. It's connected to information that is suppressed by sort of the activity and the worry of the day. And so living your best life, when we talk about living your best life, we always talk about actually doing something that's extraordinary, or doing something that's special. But if you're in your thinking mind while you're doing that special thing, then you're still not connecting to it. I think I think living your best life actually occurs in those moment by moment, minute by minute, everyday things that we do that we don't celebrate, that we take for granted, or that we're disconnected to because we're thinking about what's on in our smartphone, or we're worrying about what social media is doing or what the media is saying, or it's just, like we just get overwhelmed, right? So that would be the first thing, is just become aware of what's around you. And then the other thing might be to do things that you love to do that take you out of the thinking mind. And then use those as productive, interesting times to just enjoy life. And then I think maybe the third thing is just become aware, like you so elegantly said earlier on, about when are you in your thinking mind, right? And then just start to recognize that you're in your thinking mind. And sort of like to just observe your thinking. Oh, yeah, there it goes. Okay.
And then stop. Yeah.
And it stops. Yeah. And it's like it's being found out.
So what I find like fascinating about all this, again, we're at the 2 years into a pandemic. A lot of people's worlds have been turned upside down. Myself, I have 2 little guys, so I've been the virtual teacher at home. I've been a daycare, daycare responsibilities, working full time, and carrying on with life. And so a lot of people that I've talked to, colleagues, friends, family, a lot of people are tired, they're exhausted, mentally drained. And that was me again 7 months ago. And we have talked about how much energy and capacity each individual has. And you can't give more than 100%, right? Or, it's not physically possible. But when we looked at how much time I was spending in my actual thinking mind, again, that worrying, and really we talk about like, you're making shit up, you're making up arguments in your head. And what's this person going to think or that? So now when I'm in there, and again, I find myself arguing with myself in the shower, I will put a pause on it. And what I've been able to do is I'll literally say to myself in my mind, in that, second, in that instance, I'm wasting my time thinking about or worrying about this. I'm going to move my thinking to something more productive. Like, how am I going to solve this problem? Or thinking about something that's more enjoyable, like a hobby or an interest. And the more that I've done that, the less I find myself sliding into the thinking mind.
Right.
And so what's actually happened to me is my life hasn't changed per se. Like, I'm still a parent, I'm still a father, I'm still, a work professional, but I know when to spend the right amount of energy with the right amount of intensity at the right time. And so now what I find myself saying to family or friends, if we're talking about something that I just don't have the energy for, my wife might send me a picture about, $2 t-shirts, on Facebook, how many should we buy? That's not something I want to worry about or think about. I give her the ability to make that decision for herself. And then I'll go back into what I was doing that's supposed to be productive or working and fulfilling, right? So what I'm curious about with all the folks that you've talked to over the years, Jonathan, is like, do you actually have an idea of percentages where the average human spends in their thinking mind versus working mind versus aware mind? Because a lot of people are doing it without knowing.
Yeah, so ironically, we spend a great deal of our time in aware mind. Like you couldn't drive a car if you weren't in aware mind most of your time, right? It's just that we're not conscious of being in aware mind. Most of our thinking, and I'm not a clinical psychologist, and I haven't done any sort of research on this, but a huge amount of our thinking, and I guess some research has been done. I don't know how they got this number, but we have about 50,000 thoughts a day. It takes about 10,000 of a second to generate a thought. So you can think about how many minutes or hours we spend thinking unnecessarily about things, right? So, so the vast majority of our thinking is thinking mind thinking. Now, human beings, it takes a huge amount of energy, calories to think. Like this is proven. We are successful on the planet because we were able to move from sort of a physicality to a mental processing. Mental processing takes up an enormous amount of our energy. So if mental processing takes up a huge amount of our energy, and most of our thinking is chattering, thinking mind stuff, how much energy would we really have if we slowed it down or let it sort of die a natural death? So this is so when we talk about capacity, which is the total amount of time and energy you have towards doing something, it goes without saying that if you can allow the thinking mind to just go off on its own and focus on the working mind and the aware mind, you're going to have more capacity. It's just what's been proven over and over and over with clients, that no matter how busy they are, when they focus their mind in the correct way, they achieve more, they think clearly, they're more creative, and they make way better decisions because they're operating in a much more efficient way.
So what's beautiful about that, and I'm connecting the dots for some people here or some who may have missed some of the previous episodes, you talk about just thinking takes up a lot of energy. Well, in order for us to thrive and be our best versions of ourselves, you need to have energy, right, which can help by having a good diet or eating when you're hungry or drinking when you're thirsty.
Right.
And so many of us, this is again, I was guilty of this for so long and not aware of what sort of detriments it was doing to my thinking and my body, my soul. And through these conversations now, I'm aware that when I am hungry and I'm not eating and I'll just work through this lunch or I'll get a snack later, I'm not operating at my peak version of myself. And then my emotions become a little bit more raw. They fluctuate higher and lower. And so now, being aware, when I am hungry, I will grab a snack. So here in my office, I have a drawer filled with protein bars. Or, in between Zoom meetings that we're all in, there's no reason why I can't step aside for an apple, a snack. It doesn't have to be some sophisticated meal, but I am now constantly eating throughout my day as a way to sustain my levels of energy. That was very successful for me. And then the other piece, it's breaking up my day to ensure that I'm getting exercise or fresh air or both. So in the middle of my day, I'll take a 15-20 minute walk or so just to go outside and let things slow down like you've talked about. So when things can slow down, then I have more energy to come back to my task at hand. And I find my mind so much clearer and freer, and I have that freedom because I took almost like that mental recharge break.
Yeah, well, there is a real connection between physical well-being and mental well-being, right? And I'm sort of similar to you. I need to eat regularly, small meals every 2 hours. And I just noticed that when my body is weak, like I know when a cold is coming on about 3 days or 4 days before it comes on, because my mental state drops quite significantly. So I can feel sort of a blueness coming in to me, right? So, okay, so that's really interesting as I observe that, because it's my body's not strong enough to keep the mental thoughts away. And so I feel So I can feel depression, or I can feel sort of a heaviness enter 2 or 3 days before. I must be having a cold coming on. So I'll do something to keep that cold at bay. And then all of a sudden, bam, I'm back again, right? I'm not taking that feeling personally anymore. There's a natural connection between the energy of your body and your mental energy, and you can make that connection between the two of them. We can see thought rather like a system rather than just emanating from one place, right up here. And when you sort of see that connection between the mind and the body and how they interact, then you can, keep your capacity, you can keep your energy higher. But you have to really become aware of that connection, because your thought can create an emotion. The emotion reinforces the thought, and it's like a feedback loop. When you sort of discount the emotional feeling because it's a thinking mind thing, it's like a willow in the wisp, then you don't have to take it personally, you don't have to connect to it.
I'm going to put a pause here, Jonathan. My little guy came into my office, and there's a lot of. So the one thing that I really love that you mentioned there, Jonathan, was when you start to feel ill or you start to feel run down, you take action. That is the key piece, is the commitment to change. So if anyone ever finds themselves, again, bring it back in the thinking mind, arguing with yourself, making shit up, self-doubt, guilt, shame, questioning, be aware that you're in that state of mind and change it. And that's a very, very powerful thing. So when you're hungry, you eat. If you feel like you need that spike of energy, go outside for that walk, break up your day. So I love when you say when you're starting to feel it, you do something about it. And that to me is how we live our best life, by doing something.
Well, when you start to recognize that you're more aware mind than you are chattering mind, right? Like who you are is all three of those things, but you're more, but as the chatter starts to dissipate and disappear, then you start to recognize that you're way more than the emotions that you have. That you yourself are the only reason that you're alive is because awareness keeps you alive. The aware mind is constantly keeping you from doing dangerous things that are unconnected to the working mind, right? So it's almost like this partnership of awareness and working mind is what's actually keeping you alive and keeping you successful and moving through the day. It's awareness keeps you from walking into the pothole on the street. It keeps you from stumbling on the route when you go for a walk in the woods, or tripping over the sidewalk that's raised a bit, right? So most of your life is spent in aware mind. It's just that we think it's the thinking, chattering mind that's actually keeping us successful. So when you realize that, then what the chattering mind is doing becomes less important. And when it realizes that it's less important, then it starts really starting to, you can't get rid of the thinking mind. What you can do is understand that it's not that important to you living your best life. And it starts to just sort of decay or stop or shut down, or it's almost like it realizes it's not doing what it thinks it's doing for you, and it starts to give up. It's just a very bizarre thing.
So a lot of people may doubt what we're saying, or it can't be that easy, or whatever it is. But here I am, a believer, because I've lived through it, and you've helped lots of people over the years. So let's say our viewers, they love this session here today, but now tonight they can't sleep because they've got a giant project tomorrow.
Yeah. What do you mean? I'm supposed to. I know. Well, so we think that worry equals caring, right? That if I don't worry, I don't care. So therefore, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I better worry about it, because that means that I really care about it. But we don't solve problems by worrying about them. I mean, that's almost self-evident, right? Mm-hmm. Where we solve problems is letting the thinking mind disappear or quiet down and focus on allowing the problem to emerge, or the solution to emerge, right? And so that's when you're going to think about that presentation you have the next morning, is being totally present to the presentation that next morning. And I know I didn't answer your question, but the thinking mind believes that worry is going to solve the problem for you. But problems are solved through the emergence of the answer, letting the answer emerge, right? And it can't emerge if the thinking mind is the primary driver of trying to solve the problem. You can't try to solve a problem. You can just solve the problem.
And when we talk about, I'm going to bring this in, secret sauce here for a moment. And it's a term that Jonathan and I have talked about a couple different episodes, but to me, the secret sauce, it's when is Jeremy in his best flow of being? When am I you mentioned being the most creative first thing in the morning, or what makes me feel good? And so when I find those moments of being overwhelmed by the thinking mind, I've discovered how much I love music, just love music. And so there's times where I'll put on my headphones and put on my favorite jam and tune everything else out. The headphones take out all the outside noise, and I'll sit there and I'll just enjoy that. Or going outside for that walk, finding that secret sauce that gets me motivated, inspired, and to, pause all the wasted time and thinking about chatter. So what I've found worked for me, again, when I'm laying in bed, worrying, overthinking, making shit up, starting arguments, I have found that that's when I do my best meditation.
Right.
And it helps me fall asleep. So you'll be laying there in bed worrying about something. As soon as I'm aware that I'm in my chat or doing chatter, I put a pause onto it, and I immediately go into focusing on just breathing. That's all I'm supposed to be thinking about, is breathing. It's as simple as in through your nose, out through your mouth, repeat, and clearing my mind of everything else. And of course, my mind does wander. But in that instance where it does start to wander, I remind myself to go back into breathing. And so that's how I've been able to immediately get better sleeps, put that worry aside, because again, I'm not going to solve anything. Not that I don't care, but worrying about it's not going to solve the problem. And this whole concept leads into what I love, Jonathan, is also trusting the people, trusting the process, and trusting yourself. So those three things are key. So when we talk about not knowing what the answer is, when you surround yourself with talented individuals, and we all know we're great at what we do, like you hope that everyone has some sort of secret sauce of their own, and following their own passions and geniuses as to what they do great. Well, if you know you're great at something, trust yourself that it'll get figured out. And it doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but trusting yourself that it'll get done or figured out. You know, trusting the people around you, you know, whether you work in big teams or small teams, trusting those people that they're all competent to get it done. And then when we have processes, and again, processes is very operational and they might not exist in some organizations, but trusting that the ideas will come or the solutions will come, a lot of it does come through communication. So if Jonathan and I are working on a project together and, you know, I don't understand what Jonathan's saying or vice versa, not being afraid to ask. And it's not to be confrontational, but it's just to help set the context, help to understand, which goes back to trusting the people, trusting the processes, and trusting yourself.
So trust becomes really important to living your best life, right? Because mistrusting takes a huge amount of energy, and it disconnects you from your own sort of thoughts and creativity, and it also can create misinterpretations of other people's actions and judgment of individuals, and sort of, you know, one of the concepts we talk about in the leadership transformation workshops is the 6 ways we make shit up. And so we make up stories about other people, we make up stories about ourselves, we mind read what we think people are thinking or doing, because we don't trust them, or we hold these old tapes about who they are, right? And so to trust others, we have to let go of, sometimes we have to let go of these preconceptions of who we think people are, really watch them, really listen to them, really connect to them. And maybe our preconception is right, or maybe it's wrong. But if we hold only one viewpoint, then we don't allow other possibilities to emerge. And we have to allow those other possibilities to emerge before we can. So it's almost like you have to prove your hypothesis first by being objective about the other person. Mm. And then you free them up to be different as well, right? And so trusting the process is, you're right about, you know, lots of organizations, especially sort of at the lower stages of effectiveness, don't have systems and processes in place. They're constantly redoing everything, you know, solving problems again and again using different solutions instead of finding one specific solution that works most of the time. But trusting the process is also about trusting sort of how the world works. So sort of on a different, deeper layer of trust the process. When you start to observe how the world works, and you start to see how the world works in a different way, that it doesn't, that nature, although, you know, appears to struggle and all that, and it's a very elegant dance, and you know how the world works. When you start to see different layers of it, you start to see that how the world actually works, how it succeeds, how it gets through the day, is very different than what the thinking mind thinks it is.
Mm-hmm. And in our past sessions, Jonathan, you've talked about observing without judgment. I think this is a great piece to talk about here. It's, you talk about you know, making shit up or starting these arguments in your head, or knowing what Jeremy's going to say or do next because of past history or whatnot. And then you're just writing your own story without giving Jeremy the chance to, you know, excel or live his best life or whatever. Do you want to just touch on observing without judgment?
Observing the judgment's a really great way of tapping into the sort of that working mind, aware mind partnership. And people have sort of commented when they get good at it, the thinking mind automatically shuts down because you're focused, because your attention is preoccupied with what's going on around you, or that person that you're attending to, or so you're working. So if you're working, the chatter stops because you're present. And when we're present to something, time stops, we forget who we are, and we're just engrossed in what it is that we're absolutely doing, right? So observing without judgment is like the first step to really starting to see people clearly. And in the workshop, we talked about how you trap people into doing things the same way because you hold a belief about them and people give you what you believe. So when you stop judging somebody, you're also giving them the freedom to be different for you. And I've literally had people come up and say, you know, I started seeing so and so in a very neutral way, and all of a sudden I heard what they were saying to me in a different way. It's like we were working with a manager of HR in a manufacturing plant, and she would always have this one person come up to her, and she always interpreted what this person was doing as complaining, and she didn't want to talk to him anymore. But she was sort of practicing observing without judgment, and she didn't hear the complaining anymore. She heard his passion and his interest in the company and wanting to make things better, but not knowing how to communicate his thoughts because he was frustrated. Mm-hmm. And his frustration was passion, just ill-directed passion, right? Ill communicated passion. Mm-hmm. So when she got through all of the judgment she had about him and she started to look at him in a more neutral, sort of non-judgmental way, she actually heard who he actually was and then was able to listen to him. And then he stopped complaining because she was actually able to help him.
That's an awesome story. As part of these videos, we're trying to engage our audience, and I was trying to come up with some fun or clever things to do with the segment, Jonathan. Right. And one of them was going to be like rapid fire questions, you know, so we could get to know who our speaker is today. So, you know, the question is dog or cat? You know, which would you choose? You know, favorite book.
Right.
And so I was like, well, if we're talking about observing without judgment, that's the last thing I want to lead with, is have people have all these notions about, well, this guy hates dogs but loves cats. What kind of man is he? You know what I mean? So again, when you think about observing without judgment, you know, we talk about slowing things down, not making up shit in your head. So just be in the moment, just being in that present moment and digesting everything around you. You mentioned going outside to enjoy the fresh air. Well, next team meeting that you go into, maybe don't be the first one to speak. You know, maybe digest what others are around without letting your thinking mind run wild about Jeremy's going to have another crazy idea again, because that's what he's all about, but more digest and slow, like digest all that information that's coming out. And when you observe without judgment, I think, as you mentioned, you will see people through different lens.
And that's really part of living your best life, isn't it? Right? It's having options. Living your best life might be that you're not trapped anymore by a certain way of thinking, that you're more open, that you're more aware of what's going on around you. You're more aware of the people, and you're more aware of a different level of information that you can connect to within yourself. And then that can translate to your everyday activity And when you do those extraordinary things that we think we should be doing to live our best life, you'll enjoy them even more.
And again, you'll see it once you're operating more of your aware mind. I know that people will have less battles with the thinking mind. So, so that has been this has been a great dialogue today, Jonathan. For those viewers who want more, we're going to be producing more content between Jonathan and myself. So, follow us on YouTube, and we'll be sure to keep providing the valuable content. So again, thanks again so much, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure.
Always great fun, Jeremy. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah.